For 10 years, falling asleep meant feeling Sarah's warmth beside me, her hand brushing mine, a silent comfort. Then one night she simply said, "Could you just not sleep so close?" It was delivered quietly, almost a murmur as I shifted closer to her in bed. I remember pulling my arm back, a strange, hollow feeling settling in my chest. We had been married for a decade, together even longer, and our physical closeness had always been a given, an unspoken foundation. Our legs tangled, our backs pressed together, her head on my shoulder. These were the natural positions of sleep for us. Her request felt like a physical shove, even though she hadn't touched me. "Oh, sorry," I mumbled, already feeling a flush of confusion and something like shame. "Bad day?" I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to rationalize it away. She worked as a graphic designer, and deadlines could be brutal. Maybe she just needed space, a little more room to breathe, even in her sleep. "Yeah, long day," she replied, her voice still quiet, already turning away from me. Her back was to me now, a wall, and I stayed on my side of the bed, feeling suddenly very aware of the empty space between us. It wasn't a huge bed, a queen, but that night, it felt enormous. I lay there for a long time, listening to her breathing, trying to make sense of something that felt so out of character. It was just a small thing, I told myself, a blip. We all have those moments when we need our own space. I tried to push the unease down, but it lingered, a cold spot in the warm familiarity of our bedroom. The next morning, things felt normal enough. We had coffee, talked about our plans for the day. She kissed me goodbye, a quick peck on the cheek, like always. But as the days turned into a week, then two, the "don't sleep so close" wasn't just a one-off. It became a pattern. Every night, if I reached for her, or if I drifted closer in my sleep, I'd wake to her subtle shift away, or that same quiet, almost apologetic, request for space. It felt like walking on eggshells in my own bed. Soon, it wasn't just in bed. The casual touches that had always been part of our daily life started to disappear. The hand on my arm when we talked, the quick hug in the kitchen, the way she used to lean against me on the couch. These small, intimate gestures that formed the connective tissue of our relationship slowly evaporated. I found myself reaching for her, only to stop short, unsure if my touch would be unwelcome. Her usual warmth seemed to have cooled, replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible barrier. I tried to talk to her about it. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked one evening, as we sat watching TV. "You seem a little distant lately." She looked up from her phone, a slight frown on her face. "Distant? No, I'm fine. Just tired. Work's really busy right now, you know?" She offered a small, tired smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She went back to scrolling, her thumb a blur across the screen. Her phone, which used to be something we'd occasionally share, showing each other funny videos, or asking for help with an email, had become an extension of her, a private world I wasn't invited into. She kept it face down on surfaces, and if I walked into the room, she'd often quickly swipe out of whatever app she was on. It felt like a minor detail, something I was probably overthinking, but the accumulation of these minor details started to feel like a heavy weight. Her schedule started to shift too. What used to be predictable evenings at home, cooking dinner together, or just relaxing, began to include new commitments. "Oh, I'm meeting Jessica for drinks tonight," she'd say. Or, "My team has a late-night push on this project. I'll probably be home after you're asleep." Jessica was her old college friend, but these impromptu drinks felt more frequent, more urgent than before. And the late-night pushes for work became a recurring theme, often explained with a vague shrug and a tired sigh. I wanted to believe her, wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but a quiet alarm bell began to ring in the back of my mind. I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested a date night, just the two of us, like we used to do. "Maybe we could try that new Italian place downtown," I offered, hopeful. She hesitated, then said, "Oh, honey, that sounds nice, but I really have so much on my plate right now. Can we save it for another time? I'm just so swamped." Her voice was gentle, but the rejection still stung. It wasn't just the refusal, it was the way she seemed genuinely preoccupied, her mind already elsewhere. There were other things, small things I initially dismissed as quirks or coincidence. She started taking longer showers, often humming softly to herself, a habit I hadn't heard in years. She bought a few new clothes, nothing drastic, but a style that felt a little different, a little more youthful perhaps. And she started styling her hair differently, a sleek, polished look instead of her usual messy bun. Each change, on its own, was insignificant. Together they painted a picture of a woman investing more in herself, but not, it seemed, in costs. The worst part was the silence. Not just the quiet in the house, but the silence between us. Our conversations became shallower, less about our feelings or our day, more about logistics, bills, groceries, whose turn it was to walk the dog. The laughter we once shared effortlessly now felt forced or simply absent. I missed her jokes, her insights, the way she used to light up when talking about something she was passionate about. That light seemed dimmed, or perhaps just pointed in a different direction. I would lie awake at night long after she had finally drifted off, staring at the ceiling. The space between us in the bed felt like a chasm. I would replay our conversations, her dismissive phrases, her hurried exits, her guarded phone. I loved her deeply, more than anything, and the thought that something might be truly wrong, that our marriage might be in trouble, filled me with a cold dread. But I couldn't put my finger on it. There was no argument, no major fight, no dramatic event. Just this slow, insidious erosion of intimacy, starting with a simple request not to sleep too close. One night I reached for her in my sleep, a reflex I couldn't seem to break. My hand brushed her hip and she flinched, pulling away sharply, almost a gasp. She rolled completely to the other side of the bed, creating the maximum possible distance, her back a rigid line. I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, the silence deafening. It wasn't just about space anymore, it was about rejection. It felt like she was deliberately trying to create as much distance as possible, not just in bed, but in our lives, and I had no idea why, or what to do about it. The cold spot in my chest had grown into a freezing ache. That flinch, the sharp gasp, the immediate rigid turn of her back. It wasn't just about space in bed anymore. It was a physical manifestation of a deeper rejection, a wall she was actively building between us. I lay there, motionless, the darkness amplifying the frantic beat of my heart and the sudden, chilling emptiness beside me. The cold spot I'd felt before had spread, a freezing ache radiating through my chest, settling deep in my bones. The next morning, the silence in the kitchen was heavier than usual. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a shared morning routine, but a strained quiet, punctuated by the clinking of our mugs and the soft rustle of newspaper. Sarah moved with a practiced detachment, her eyes focused somewhere beyond me, her smile, when it came, a brief, brittle thing. I wanted to reach out, to ask her what was wrong, but the memory of her flinch held me back. The thought of that same rejection in broad daylight felt unbearable. The distance in bed became a fixed reality. She would wait until I was settled, sometimes even until she thought I was asleep, before slipping in, always staying on her side, a deliberate margin of mattress between us. The casual touches, the way her foot would find mine under the covers, or her arm would drape over my waist as she drifted off. Those little intimacies that spoke volumes, they were completely gone. Our bed, once a sanctuary of shared warmth, had become a desolate expanse, a constant reminder of what we'd lost. Her phone habits escalated into a full-blown obsession with privacy. It was no longer just face down on the table. It was clutched in her hand, taken with her to the bathroom, even placed beneath her pillow at night. If I was in the room, she'd quickly swipe away from whatever she was looking at, or turn the screen off entirely. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just an extension of her busy graphic designer persona, always working, always connected. But the furtiveness, the almost defensive way she guarded it, chipped away at that convenient explanation. I tried to initiate conversation, real conversation, about us. "Hey, everything okay?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice neutral, not accusatory. "You seem a little distant lately." She'd always have an answer ready, a variation of, "Just tired, work's been insane," or, "I'm fine, you're overthinking it." Her explanations were often delivered with a slight impatience, a subtle shift in her posture that conveyed a desire to end the discussion, to move on to something lighter, or nothing at all. Our conversations, once meandering and intimate, became transactional, focused on logistics and superficial pleasantries. I suggested a date night, a dinner out, just the two of us, hoping to rekindle something. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" I asked, trying to sound hopeful. She hesitated, then sighed. "Honey, I'm just so swamped. That new ad campaign is eating me alive. Can we later?" The later felt like an automatic response, a polite dismissal. It never materialized. Every attempt I made to bridge the gap, to pull her back towards me, was met with a practiced deflection, a subtle push away that felt increasingly deliberate. Her appearance continued to evolve. The new clothes weren't just a one-off shopping spree. Her wardrobe seemed to be undergoing a complete overhaul. More fashionable, less casual, definitely more effort. Her hair, which she'd often just tie back, was now styled, highlights touched up, always looking perfect. She even started wearing makeup more consistently, even on days when she was supposedly just working from home. I complimented her, of course. She'd offer a tight smile. Just felt like a change. But the changes felt less about her and more about presenting a new version of herself to someone else. The drinks with Jessica became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, event, and the late-night work pushes stretched longer and longer. I'd be asleep when she came home, or she'd slip in silently, often not even coming to bed for a while, claiming she was finishing up emails. One evening I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I overheard her on the phone, a hushed conversation. I only caught a snippet. "No, he's asleep. Yeah, soon. Okay." Her voice was soft, almost secretive, completely unlike her usual tone when talking to her college friend Jessica. When she saw me, her eyes widened for a split second, and she quickly ended the call, her face flushing slightly. "Jessica, being dramatic," she said. Too quickly, too brightly. That brief exchange, the sudden change in her demeanor, it sparked a new, colder kind of suspicion in me. It wasn't just about her being tired or busy anymore. It felt like she was actively hiding something, something that required a hushed phone call in the dark and a quick cover-up. The thought that she might be talking about me, that I was an obstacle in her hushed conversation, gnawed at me. I kept reminding myself that Jessica was her best friend, that women talked about everything. But the tone, the secrecy, it just didn't fit. I found myself analyzing every little detail, every glance, every word. Was I imagining it? Was I just being paranoid, driven by insecurity? I'd try to convince myself that I was overreacting, that our marriage was strong, built on 10 years of trust and shared history. But then she'd retreat into her phone again, or offer another vague excuse for why she couldn't spend time with me, and the doubt would creep back in, heavy and suffocating. The physical distance in our bed was now mirrored by an emotional distance that felt oceanic. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah mentioned she was meeting Jessica for coffee. "Just a quick catch-up," she said, grabbing her keys. She kissed me on the cheek, a dry, perfunctory touch, and left. An hour later, I realized I'd left my wallet in her car. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't want to bother her at her coffee date, so I decided to walk to the local coffee shop where they usually met. As I approached, I saw her car, but she wasn't inside. I glanced through the window. No Sarah, no Jessica. I stood there for a moment, a knot tightening in my stomach. Then I saw her. She was walking out of a different building across the street, a small, independent art gallery I didn't even know existed. She wasn't alone. A man, tall with dark hair, was with her. He was laughing at something she said, a genuine, easy laugh. Sarah was smiling too, a bright, unrestrained smile I hadn't seen directed at me in weeks, perhaps months. They parted ways at the corner, and she headed back towards her car, alone. I ducked behind a parked van, feeling like a spy in my own life. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, irregular drum. She got into her car, still smiling, and drove off. I waited a few minutes, feeling numb, before walking back home. When she returned an hour later, she was humming, a light, almost giddy tune. "Jessica was great," she chirped, coming into the kitchen where I was pretending to read the paper. "We talked for ages." The lie hung in the air between us, thick and palpable. I didn't challenge her. I couldn't. My voice felt stuck in my throat, choked by the raw reality of what I had just seen. She had lied, not just about meeting Jessica, but about where she'd been, and who she'd been with. And her joy, that easy, radiant joy she'd shown that man, it was nowhere to be found when she was with me. The freezing ache in my chest had now turned into a burning certainty. I didn't know the full story, but I knew, with sickening clarity, that something was profoundly wrong. The burning certainty I felt after seeing Sarah with that man didn't make anything easier. It just replaced confusion with a heavy, suffocating dread. The numbness from before had given way to a sharp, constant ache. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions, trying to process what I had witnessed. The image of her laughing with him, that open, joyful expression, replayed in my mind relentlessly. It was a joy she hadn't shown me in months, perhaps even longer. I started watching her, not overtly but with an almost painful attention to detail. Every glance, every hurried text, every late return became a potential piece of the puzzle. I felt like a detective in my own home, sifting through the wreckage of my marriage, searching for the truth. It was an awful way to live, but I couldn't stop. The alternative was ignorance, and that felt even worse. Her phone, which had already become a fortress, was now impenetrable. It never left her side, not even when she went to the bathroom. If it did, it was always face down, always locked. I tried to casually ask about her new phone security, once suggesting she must have a lot of sensitive work information. She just shrugged, said her firm had new protocols, and changed the subject. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. The Jessica outings continued, as did the late work nights, but now I knew they were lies, or at least partial ones. There was always a vague explanation, a hurried kiss on the cheek, and then the door would close behind her. I would stand in the quiet apartment, the silence amplifying the thumping in my chest, wondering where she really was and who she was with. Sometimes, I'd track her car on the family app, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But her car would often be parked in areas that weren't near Jessica's place, or anywhere near her office. It was always a different part of the city, near neighborhoods I didn't recognize. I'd shut the app, ashamed of my own behavior, but the information would linger, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. One evening, Sarah came home humming that same giddy tune I'd heard before. She went straight to the shower, as she often did after these outings. I noticed a faint, unfamiliar scent in the air, something floral and sweet, not her usual perfume. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it registered. As she stepped into the bathroom, her phone was on the bedside table, face down, as usual. For a moment, I hesitated. My heart pounded. I could feel the tremor in my hands. This was it, the line I swore I wouldn't cross. But the burning certainty was too strong. I needed to know. I picked up the phone. It was locked, of course. My own number, which used to be her emergency contact, didn't work as a passcode hint. I put it back, feeling a wave of self-loathing wash over me. I wasn't this person. I never would have done this before. But who was I now? A man whose wife wouldn't sleep next to him, who lied to him, who laughed with other men. I felt a desperate, clawing need for clarity. A few days later, I was reviewing our shared credit card statement. We usually kept tabs on it, our finances were always transparent, There was a charge for a small, independent art gallery downtown. Not the gallery I'd seen her leaving, but a different one. The amount was a few $100s. Sarah hadn't mentioned buying anything, and we hadn't been to an art gallery together in years. She knew I wasn't really into abstract art, which was the specialty of this particular place. I clicked on the transaction, and the receipt image popped up. It was for 2 tickets to a private viewing, plus a small, framed print. The timestamp was from a Tuesday evening, a night she told me she was working late. My breath caught in my throat. 2 tickets, a private viewing. She loved art, but she always dragged me along, or went with Jessica if it was a big exhibition. A private viewing? Just for her? And a print? She never bought art without my input, especially not for our home. The print wasn't a large purchase, but it wasn't insignificant either. It was the 2 tickets, and the lie about her whereabouts that screamed at me. Later that week, I decided I couldn't live with the unspoken anymore. The distance in bed had become a metaphor for the chasm in our lives. I needed to try. After dinner, I asked her if we could talk. She seemed surprised. Then her face went neutral. "Sure," she said, her voice carefully even. We sat on the sofa, not too close. "Sarah," I started, trying to keep my voice calm, "I feel like we've been really distant lately. Not just physically, but emotionally. I miss us." She fiddled with a loose thread on the cushion. I know," she murmured, not looking at me. "It's just been a crazy few months at work. The new campaign, it's really demanding. I'm exhausted when I get home, you know?" "I understand work is demanding," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like more than that. It feels like you're pulling away. I want to understand. Is there something going on? Something you're not telling me?" She finally looked at me, her eyes clouded. "What are you talking about? Nothing's going on. I'm just tired. And honestly, your constant questioning isn't helping. It's making me feel scrutinized, like I'm doing something wrong just by being busy." "I'm not trying to scrutinize you," I replied, the frustration seeping into my tone despite my efforts. "I'm trying to connect with my wife. The woman who used to fall asleep with her head on my chest. Now you don't even want me to sleep on my side of the bed." Her jaw tightened. "Don't exaggerate. It was one request, because I get hot at night. And it's not like you're making an effort either. You're always so passive, just waiting for me to initiate everything. Maybe I need space because I'm not feeling appreciated, or desired, or seen." Her words were a shield, deflecting my concerns back at me, twisting them into accusations. It was a familiar tactic, one I'd seen before when she wanted to avoid a difficult conversation. "Is that what this is about?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Because I've tried. I've asked you out, suggested dates. You're always busy, always tired. How am I supposed to make an effort when every attempt is met with a wall?" She sighed, a dramatic, exasperated sound. "Look, can we just drop this? I'm not in the mood for an inquisition right now. I just want some peace." She stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. She walked over to the window, her back to me, effectively shutting me out. I sat there, feeling defeated, angry, and more alone than ever. Her deflection was so complete, so practiced, that it made my suspicions solidify into something cold and hard. A few nights later, unable to sleep, I found myself pacing the house. Sarah was asleep, or pretending to be. I went into her office, where she often left papers from work. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a distraction, perhaps proof that she was indeed working hard. On her desk, tucked under a stack of design sketches, I saw a small, folded piece of paper. It looked like a receipt. My curiosity, or desperation, overwhelmed me. I unfolded it carefully. It was from a florist, dated from 2 weeks ago. The items listed were a single red rose and a small, delicate card. The total was only about $15. My heart sank. A single red rose, from a florist, to whom? It wasn't an anniversary, it wasn't my birthday, and it certainly wasn't for me. We hadn't exchanged flowers in years. The receipt didn't have a recipient name, just the items and the date. But the implication was chillingly clear. Someone was receiving flowers from Sarah. And it wasn't me. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, my hands shaking. The florist was located in that same general area of the city where I'd seen her car parked on the tracking app. The area where I had seen her laughing with that man. The ambiguity of it was almost worse than explicit proof. A single rose, a delicate card. It was so personal, so intimate. And it was meant for someone else. I felt a cold wave wash over me, a realization that the distance in our bed, the guarded phone, the lies, the absent joy, it all added up to a picture I no longer wanted to see. I stood in her office, surrounded by her designs and her secrets, feeling the ground crumble beneath my feet. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, my hands shaking. The florist was located in that same general area of the city where I'd seen her car parked on the tracking app, the area where I had seen her laughing with that man. The ambiguity of it was almost worse than explicit proof. A single rose, a delicate card. It was so personal, so intimate. And it was meant for someone else. I felt a cold wave wash over me, a realization that the distance in our bed, the guarded phone, the lies, the absent joy, it all added up to a picture I no longer wanted to see. I stood in her office, surrounded by her designs and her secrets, feeling the ground crumble beneath my feet. The ground had been crumbling for weeks, maybe months, but I had refused to acknowledge it. I told myself it was work, stress, my own insecurities. Now standing there, the truth was an avalanche. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was certainty. The woman I loved, the one I had shared a bed with for a decade, had systematically dismantled our life, piece by piece, right under my nose. And I knew, with a chilling clarity, that the first piece she moved was me. I didn't confront her that night. What was there to say? I was too numb, too raw. I went through the motions of dinner, of our usual shallow conversation, of getting ready for bed. The distance between us was a physical weight in the air. When I climbed into bed, I automatically moved to my side, leaving the vast expanse she now demanded. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment, every lie, every deflection. The tired, the busy, the Jessica. Each memory was a fresh cut. The next morning, I called my work and took a personal day. I told them it was a family emergency, which felt like the most honest thing I could say. Sarah left for work as usual, her cheerful, "Bye, honey," feeling like a cruel mockery. As the door clicked shut, the silence in the house was deafening, but it was also a relief. I needed to think. I needed to understand what I was going to do. I spent the day walking, just walking, through parks, down quiet streets, past old houses. I called my brother Mark, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him anything specific. I just said things felt off with Sarah, that I was worried. He listened, offered to come over, but I told him I needed to sort it out myself first. The words felt inadequate, a pathetic summary of the earthquake rattling my world. By the time Sarah came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of cold coffee in front of me. The house was quiet, the way it often was now, waiting. She walked in, her purse slung over her shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips. "Hey," she said, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door. "Rough day?" She must have noticed the silence, the lack of my usual greeting. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her hair was styled, her clothes were new, her face held a freshness that hadn't been for me in a long time. There was a lightness to her, a joy I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It was the same expression I had seen when she was with that man outside the gallery. And it solidified everything. "Sarah," I started, my voice flat, almost unrecognizable even to me. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. Her eyes, which had been so bright, clouded slightly. "Oh, no, what's wrong?" She took a step back, her hand moving unconsciously to her phone in her bag. It was the same reaction she always had when any conversation veered off the shallow path. "It's not, what's wrong?" I said. "It's, what's happened?" I stood up, walked over to the counter and picked up her keys. "You told me you were with Jessica the other night. You told me you were working late. You told me you were just tired." I wasn't shouting. My voice was calm, steady, each word a stone dropping into a deep well. She fidgeted. I was with Jessica. Then I had to finish up a project at the office, I told you." "No, Sarah, you weren't. I saw you." I looked directly into her eyes. No anger, just a profound, aching sadness. "I saw you coming out of the gallery on Elm Street, laughing. You were with him." Her face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks, and her jaw tightened. She looked away, her gaze flickering around the kitchen, anywhere but at me. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "And," I continued, my voice barely a whisper, "the art gallery tickets, the small print, the florist receipt, for a single red rose and a card, dated 2 weeks ago." I didn't need to elaborate. The details were enough. She knew exactly what I was talking about. She knew I knew. She turned back to me, her eyes glistening, but there were no tears, not yet, just a desperate, cornered look. I can explain," she started, her voice barely audible. "Don't," I interrupted, raising my hand. It wasn't a demand, just a plea. "Don't bother. I've spent weeks, months, trying to explain it away. Trying to make sense of why the woman I married suddenly couldn't stand to sleep close to me anymore. Why she couldn't meet my eyes, or answer a simple question, or just be asterisk here with me." My voice cracked on the last word. The restraint was failing. She finally looked at me, and this time, the tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she choked out, her voice raw. It wasn't a confession of details, but an admission of guilt, an acknowledgement of everything I had found, an acknowledgement of the unspoken truth that had been suffocating us both. "Sorry for what, Sarah?" I asked, the pain making my own throat tight. "Sorry for making me feel like I was crazy? Sorry for lying? Or sorry you got caught?" She just shook her head, unable to form words. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to gaslight me, not anymore. The weight of the evidence and the quiet despair in my voice had finally broken through. The woman I once knew, the woman who shared my bed and my life, was truly gone. She had packed up her affection, her honesty, and her presence, and given them to someone else. "I need you to leave," I said, my voice empty, hollow. The words hung in the air, final and irreversible. She looked up, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of tears. "What?" "I need you to pack a bag, and I need you to leave, tonight." I gestured vaguely around the house. "I can't be here. Not like this. Not after all of this. Not when you've been doing this, while I was trying to figure out why you wouldn't even let me touch you in our own bed." The symbolism of the distance in bed, which had started this whole agonizing journey, now felt like the cruelest part of her betrayal. It wasn't just physical space, it was her entire existence. She didn't argue. She just stood there for a moment, the tears streaming freely now. Then, slowly, she nodded. She walked past me, her shoulders slumped, and went towards our bedroom. I heard the rustle of clothes, the opening and closing of drawers. The sounds were muted, distant, like they were happening in another house, another life. I remained in the kitchen, staring out the window at the deepening twilight. The world outside looked the same, but my world had irrevocably changed. A few minutes later she reappeared, a small duffel bag clutched in her hand, her face swollen from crying. She didn't look at me. She just walked to the front door, paused, then opened it. Before she stepped out, she whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it, "I really am sorry. I wish I hadn't hurt you," and then she was gone. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the sudden, profound silence of the house. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet, to the echo of her words, to the thumping of my own broken heart. The immediate aftermath wasn't dramatic, wasn't a shouting match or a slammed door. It was just an empty house, an empty space beside me, and the beginning of a long, painful silence. I walked into the bedroom, the room where we had shared so much, and now, where she had demanded her distance. The bed was still made, but it felt impossibly vast. It felt like a monument to everything that had been lost, to the space she had made, a space I couldn't close. And for the first time in months, I felt a strange, cold sense of clarity. The confusion was gone. The dread was still there, but it was coupled with a painful, undeniable truth. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me.